Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. Early last month, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan publicly put the Russian-backed Syrian regime on notice. Fall back behind Turkey's observation posts in Syria's last rebel stronghold or face the consequences. Well, those consequences officially became reality on Sunday with the announcement of Turkey's latest mission, Operation Spring Shield. The sharp escalation saw the Turkish Air Force shoot down at least 3 Syrian regime fighter jets over Idlib. The Turkish military says that it has killed more than 2,500 regime forces. Targets deep inside Syria have also been hit, including a military airport near Aleppo. Turkey's military assault on the Syrian regime came just days after an airstrike in Idlib killed at least 35 Turkish soldiers. And now Russia says it'll deploy military police to the strategic town of Saraqeb, which has seen heavy fighting. President Erdogan is also scheduled to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Moscow later this week in hopes of drawing down this latest crisis. Meanwhile, migrants continue to make their way to Europe days after Turkey announced it would no longer hold them back. Greek border guards have fired tear gas at migrants as hundreds of refugees also arrived by boat on several Greek islands. So, where will Turkey's latest military operation lead, and how will this latest migration crisis unfold? To break that all down, joining me is now Matthew Bryza, who is a former U.S. ambassador, Onur Erim, a political analyst, and joining us from Ankara, Bilgehan Ozturk, who is a political analyst at the SETA Research Center. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So, the Turkish military launched on Sunday the Operation Spring Shield in Idlib in response to this blatant attack by the regime forces, which killed at least 34 Turkish soldiers. On the other hand, we already know that Turkey already secured a significant area within its border with the operations Euphrates Shield, Olive Branch, and Peace Spring, and in a way relieve the humanitarian situation there. So, Onur, I want to start with you. What Turkey is trying to achieve with this particular operation, and what are the prospects?
I think when it comes to Syria, all along, from the beginning, Turkey's main concern, and quite possibly the only concern, was that it would secure its borders, it would secure its provinces, especially alongside the borders, and also make sure that there's this mass migration of Syrians fleeing from Assad's bombings, that there's a secure place for them. I don't think that aim, that goal hasn't changed yet. And I don't think it will, because Turkey has shown no other signs to have any other interest in Syria. It's taken a different formation right now, and it's also taken a different approach by Turkey to do so. At the point that we're in right now, that is what is taking, unfortunately, for all of us. But it is what it is, and Turkey's aims and goals haven't changed a bit, I don't think.
So there have been reportedly fierce clashes between the Turkish-backed opposition forces and Russian-backed regime forces, and the town of Saraqeb has once again become a focal point of all sides concerned. Tell us about its importance, because Russia just recently said it will patrol the area.
Yeah, if you just look at a map, Saraqeb is one of the most strategically significant spots on a map, because it is where the M4 highway, which runs all along the northern border of Syria, is, and then the M5, which connects the border down to Aleppo, Homs, and all the way to Damascus. So that is the key transit connecting point. It is territory that some of the rebel forces, not the ones necessarily supported by Turkey, but others have been threatening. It's a prime target strategically of the Assad regime, and if Turkey is going to take a stand to compel the Assad regime and Russia to stop their offensive, that's a logical place to take a stand. Also, it will provide the Turkish forces in their observation posts a little bit of breathing room as well, if Saraqeb was able to be taken by these pro-Turkish forces.
Okay, I want to go to Ankara, to Bilgehan. Bilgehan, how do you think this latest attack on Turkish troops have impacted Turkish military's position, and do you believe that there are new realities on the ground?
Well, definitely, it increased the willingness to take on Syrian regime forces and its backers through military aims because of the heavy loss over there. And it has changed the dynamics on the ground so far already, because we've seen an increased intensified aerial operations conducted by Turkey, especially after the drones and armed and non-armed drones. We have seen the elimination of very powerful, capable air defense systems. So and also Turkey together with the opposition fighters have eliminated a huge number of Syrian regime elements, along with its Iranian Shiite militias. Not only the militias that were sponsored by Iran, but also commanders of Iranian surrogate forces there as well. So we have experienced a transformation of the battleground so far already.
So we know that you just mentioned the Turkish offensive against regime forces also took a toll on the Iranian militia. And just recently, President Rouhani called for a meeting with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but apparently it was rejected. What do you make of it? And there's this timing of an attack on Monday. A rocket hit an armored vehicle in Turkey's Iran border, and one public servant was unfortunately killed. What do you make of Turkey-Iran relations at this point?
I'm positive that the reason why President Rouhani called for a meeting with Turkey's President Erdogan is the fact that not only regime forces proper, but also Iranian forces, Iranian-backed militias, which are not only strictly Iranian, they are Afghani, they are Pakistani, they are Iraqi Hashd-e-Shabis, and Lebanese Hezbollah.
All right.
And not only the elements we're talking about, regular elements, we're also talking about commanders of these forces that have been hit by Turkish attacks.
Yeah, okay. So, Onur, both Turkish and Russian leaders announced their commitment to the Sochi agreement. They're going to meet later this week. What should we expect from that meeting? A ceasefire?
I don't know if it would be a ceasefire right away, but we will definitely are to expect a position better than what we're in right now. What is telling us this? I don't think President Putin would have extended a request for a meeting to President Erdogan, and nor would the President Erdogan be attending to this meeting. So I do believe that we're going to improve on the current situation. I don't necessarily know if it will be a ceasefire right away, although especially the Turkish side, actually both sides, that would be their number one agenda. We may not sign that on that particular day, but maybe in a few days or a week or two to follow. But it will definitely be an improvement. Otherwise, neither one would.
But what happens if there is no ceasefire, because almost 1 million of Syrian civilians are marching towards Turkey?
As we unfortunately expected, the escalation and the severity of these attacks on both sides would escalate until the meeting date is set. And I think we're right now experiencing a lot of firing back and forth on the field. This may ease down right as of the meeting, but an official ceasefire, I'm just saying that we may not, if we don't see a ceasefire that particular day, official one, let's not be surprised. It would just be in the coming up days. But yeah, that's number one concern for both sides, especially the Turkish side, because
just
Russia
prolonging the
exactly, and Russia has the luxury of extending this announcement for some time, because they're not a direct hit when it comes to Syria.
Matthew, on the other hand, Turkey and U.S. are in close touch, especially on the latest on Idlib. James Jeffrey is here. Trump said they've been discussing ways to how to help Turkey. Tell us how the U.S. can help Turkey.
Couple ways. One, with President Trump could do two very helpful things, which are not going to be popular with his Defense Department.
Okay.
One would be to end the decades-old split within the Defense Department between the Central Command that's responsible for Middle East operations and the European Command, or today the split between people in the State Department like Ambassador Jeffrey, who would like to provide Patriot air defense missiles to Turkey, which would completely change the situation, not only militarily, but diplomatically as well, versus Secretary Esper and others in the Pentagon who are still angry at Turkey and or worry that if the U.S. provided that sort of a sophisticated weapon system, then there could be some sort of a conflict with Russia. which to me kind of ignores the fact that, well, Russia has already kind of cast the first die with the S-400s and its military presence in Syria. So President Trump, A, could end that split bureaucratically and say, we're going to help Turkey, and B, he can...
Can he risk that?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's an election year, but Americans really aren't paying attention to this. And B, he could just say, we are going to provide Turkey Patriot missiles, and by the way, Turkey, don't turn on the S-400s. Vladimir Putin wasn't going to help you during this ceasefire quest. Vladimir Putin could have stopped Assad, right? It's Russian aircraft committing war crimes, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, supporting Assad. Putin chose not to do that. This is what I would say if I were President Trump. You're with us now. You're back with us, President Erdogan. Trump could definitely do that if he wanted to.
If he wanted to. Okay, let's take a look at the humanitarian angle of this story, because as fierce clashes between warring sides continue unabated, the crisis in Idlib, already a geopolitical showdown, is fast becoming a humanitarian catastrophe as well. TRT World's Middle East correspondent Sarah Firth is following developments from the ground and brings us this report.
Many Syrians have waited 9 years for this moment. Syrian regime positions in and around Idlib are now being targeted with the full force of the Turkish military. Inside Syria, people took to the streets to celebrate.
Our message is that we are very happy that Turkey has come to stop the bloodshed and repel the criminal gangs of Assad, who have even bombed the camps in the last few days.
On the other side of the border in Hatay, Syrian refugees living in Turkey arrived to cross back to rejoin the fight.
The regime displaced many residents from the areas it captured recently. We have fled the aerial bombardment, but now there are fewer regime planes flying. Now we are going to fight, and we know we are fighting for a purpose, and Turkey is supporting us. If the Russian planes stop, the regime can no longer advance even 1 foot.
Turkey's Operation Spring Shield's stated aim is to protect the civilians in Idlib. Fleeing the regime's recent, ever-nearing offensive, people have been taking shelter wherever they can, among Idlib's olive groves, in underground shelters, even in this graveyard, the building providing much-needed cover. More than 3 million people are estimated to live in the province, almost half of them children. I'm here at the Turkey-Syria border, and behind me in the distance there you can see that white border wall, and behind that I can see the blue and white tents of displaced Syrians scattered all across the mountains. Now, in the last 3 months alone, nearly 1 million more Syrians were internally displaced inside Idlib, and many of them ended up there, right at the border. With no place left to run, Syrians in these overcrowded camps have been caught in an increasingly desperate situation.
Conditions are extremely bad. It is catastrophic here. Children are without schools, no basics to live at all. We are living in a catastrophe here.
Throughout the course of the war, IHH, a humanitarian aid agency in Turkey, had been providing much-needed help to those in Syria. This bakery in Hatay makes bread that is then taken and distributed inside Syria. Over the last few months, IHH have also been building additional shelters after the huge influx of displaced Syrians. It's given much-needed warmth and cover for some.
The situation in the camps in Idlib is really desperate. With the recent migration wave, we've been delivering emergency food packs and providing and setting up tents, delivering emergency materials from hygiene packs to winter clothes, heaters and coal. We will continue working for these people.
Though the situation for the people taking refuge along the border remains desperate, with the Syrian regime being pushed back further each day, For now at least, that imminent threat of attack is being reduced. Sarah Firth, Straight Talk.
Well, that was a comprehensive reporting by Sarah Firth. I want to get back to Ankara, to Bilgehan. Bilgehan, what could you tell us about the latest situation for civilians in the region in Idlib as opposition moves from to the south and next to Aleppo?
Well, they have been in a very hard situation for a very long time. Their hard situation conditions are still continuing. But with the inception of the military operation and the boost of to Syrian opposition fighters, and also the capture of new towns, thanks to Turkey's armed forces support, I think there are new hopes felt by the Syrian refugees or IDPs. They have been moving around for a very long time, and every single time another town was captured by the Syrian regime forces, they had to move once more. So I think it is changing slowly, but their problem has not been fully solved because the Syrian regime forces, backed by Russia, are not going to give up easily. They will continue attack. So their situation will be around like this for a while.
Onur, you were quite cautious about a ceasefire agreement between President Putin and President Erdogan. But what will happen to those people moving forward unless a ceasefire is brokered?
Make no doubt, I'm pretty sure there will be a ceasefire. I'm just saying, let's not cross our fingers that it will actually be announced officially on March 5th. But at the end of the day, what has to happen is that at least in the area of Idlib, where it was outlined by the SETA agreement, there will be a not just a demilitarized zone anymore or de-escalation zone anymore. That there won't be a single shot being fired, especially from the Assad's militia or Assad's forces. So once we have that established, we could start to have some kind of an order, and we could start to have some kind of a humane ground for people to be able to actually breathe and start pushing towards the borders as they have been doing for quite some time. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm just saying, I'm just being cautious as to this could just take a little bit more time. But make no mistake, we will have a progressive result on March 5th. I just don't know what that level of progress is.
Talking about a humane ground, Matthew, with the announcement of this operation by Turkey at the same time decided to try not to stop immigrants from crossing into Europe, and we saw some appalling footage by the Greek police, Greek patrols, and even the Greek Coast Guard were caught trying to sink a boat of the Aegean. So the situation has come to a head. What do you make of Greece's approach against the migrants and the EU's inability to respond?
Well, to use a Greek phrase, it's a tragicomedy in a way. It's obviously tragic for these poor people, but it's almost comical in that the Greek government is saying, we condemn Turkey for doing this inhumane thing, using refugees as political pawns. So we are going to maybe sink their boats or not let them come receive the humanitarian help that they need. So we're way off track here. And I think what the Turkish government has done is inevitably going to attract a lot of condemnation in Europe, in the EU, because the EU wants this problem to go away. The EU wants Turkey to be the absorptive capacity for a problem they know that will come its way if Turkey doesn't continue.
But how did EU justify gassing children?
Yeah, and so they can't justify it. So they just tried, hoping the problem would go away. But Turkey has decided to say it's not going away. As President Erdogan said yesterday, it is your turn. You will now take some of these people. And so Turkey is forcing the issue. And I think, so initially, European Union member states are going to be angry. But eventually, they're going to have to come around and help these people and hopefully contribute some assistance to the rebuilding of northern Syria.
We'll see, because we hear several high-level EU officials are coming to the Turkish-Greek border to inspect the situation. But President Erdogan, as you just mentioned, seems he's not stepping down from his decision. He had this to say earlier. Let's listen to him.
We will either ensure these people live a dignified life on their own land, or everyone will have to share the burden. The era of unilateral sacrifice is over.
Yes, strong words from the president. As you've just mentioned, he says the EU should shoulder some of Turkey's burdens. Bilgehan, let me get back to you. On the other hand, Greece just announced that it will not accept asylum applications for a month. I know that you're not an international law expert, but is asylum suspension legal?
Well, as far as I know, it is not. The problem here is not whether it is legal or not. It is not ethical. It is not sustainable. As long as these people pack up on the border of Greece, somehow they have to take at least a portion of them. It is not inevitable. It is not possible to stall their movement towards a Greek border. Even 10,000 people trying to cross the border is a huge challenge. We're talking about more than 100,000 people, and imagine that this number is doubled, and then no matter how Greece is reluctant to accept them, some of them will enter Greek territory one way or another. So it doesn't matter whether it is legal or illegal or ethical and sustainable. Greece will have to face with this reality.
All right. German Chancellor Angela Merkel now takes a more precautious tone, and she actually called for a ceasefire right away and called for the creation of a safe zone in Idlib. Onur, do you believe that Turkey's continued calls for the creation of safe zone can finally be heard by the Europeans?
Well, going back, Chancellor Merkel's remarks about a safety zone in Idlib, I believe it's of British origin. There's a very popular saying they have, which is to say good morning after supper. This has been going on for 8-9 years. Mm-hmm. This is a time. It's one of those times that EU has to decide whether its southernmost border is Bulgaria and Greece or Turkish southern border. That's the fundamental question to be answered. It's where Turkey is all bearing this extreme cost for the last 9 years because of a situation that it was not in her hands to correct in Syria. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, most of the Western European nations have not contributed as they should have. They let Turkey suffer the consequences, bear the cost. Mm-hmm. They acted like they almost wanted to help Turkey, or they were going to assist Turkey in bearing this cost, going under this weight, just because so that Europe wouldn't. That hasn't happened in the last. Mm-hmm. It's been since 2016, so last 4 years. But now it was everybody's problem. Turkey was bearing the cost. Now all President Erdogan is doing, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. Yeah. This is all of our problem.
Given the fact that far-right movements all across Europe are on the rise, how do you think this would affect the current governments in Europe, and how do you think the EU could help alleviate the situation?
Yeah, this will definitely pour fuel on those far-right populist political fires, for sure. But the fact that Chancellor Merkel has come out with this bold statement is, I think, quite significant. Her political career is probably cut short a bit by her decision to let in all those refugees and migrants. How many? Around 1.2 million? Triple that amount have come into Turkey and are being housed in Turkey. Triple that amount. She recognizes that. She knows Turkey is absolving, as you were saying, Onur, is absolving the EU of the need to act. And Turkey's had enough of the EU not acting. So her call for a safe zone, I think, is dramatic. It's the first time since way back when French leadership.
Is it going to materialize this time?
So
do you believe?
It will if the U.S. offers Patriots. It will. Oh. Russia doesn't want it, but we're at a point where maybe Russia doesn't get to vote in the way it wished to. Why? Because Turkey, I think, can maintain something called escalation dominance on the battlefield. Turkey can bring more military force to bear, enough that, as the report of Sarah Firth indicated, the Syrian regime is being pushed back. Russia has aircraft. It does not have ground forces. It has some police, but it does not have the ability to stop the Turkish military if the Turkish military is determined. So Russia is going to face a very tough choice. Do they rein in Assad, which they can do, and stop Turkey's dominance of the battlefield? or do they allow this military confrontation to continue in which Assad cannot prevail and which will open the door for the U.S. and Turkey to reconcile? So it's a horribly difficult situation, but a great opportunity now for Turkey.
All right, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much, Bilgehan, for joining us from Ankara. And gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me on the set. Appreciate it a lot.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.